You know, it's super hard for a trilogy to be seen as phenomenal, where all three movies are held at such high regard and are on par with each other. Not only did Return of the Jedi wrap up the series on a high note and made everyone desperate for more, but it was the perfect conclusion to the series. Despite The Force Awakens invalidating everything that happens in this film, lessening the legacy this film left, if you ignore that film and look at it solely based on George Lucas's vision, this was pretty much the happy ending. So what do I think? Great conclusion to a trilogy, and an even better one with the addition of the prequels. 5 movies of backstory, 2 previously and 3 post-release. After some analysis, I actually found out that I like Return of the Jedi more than Empire Strikes Back. So without further ado, let's critique this better conclusive chapter than the Disney version. No, I will not give Disney credit for anything, get used to it. It was time to finish this fight. The Rebels' final stand and the fate of the galaxy was at hand. It's been 6 months since Empire Strikes Back. Or is it a year? I don't actually know, different sources showed these 2 time spans. So I'll just go with the one I hear the most. 6 months. So anyways, it's been 6 months since Empire Strikes Back. Luke and his friends have finally come up with a plan to save Han Solo. This gives a sense of how hard it must have been to get inside. Luke sends in C-3PO and R2-D2 and tries to exchange them for Han Solo's life. The newly introduced Jabba the Hutt isn't cooperative though. And let me say, Jabba the Hutt is a great character. His design alone tells you all you need to know. Seeing this disgusting slug back in 1983 must have been a shock for many. And the movie ensures that you hate him, as he feeds his sex slave to his rancor. Gugh. Not even Pablo Escobar would want to be this guy's friend. Luke sends in Leia and Chewbacca, and they actually free Han Solo, but they get caught. Leia becomes Jabba's new sex slave. Gah. So Luke has to step in and save his friends. He manages to kill the Rancor that would have eaten him, showing us a more powerful Luke. Empire Strikes Back Luke would have gotten eaten. Jabba decides to try to kill Luke again using the Sarlacc. It's here where things get crazy, as Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie and Lando manage to escape with their lives. Meanwhile, Jabba is strangled to death and Boba Fett gets swallowed by the Sarlacc, ending his story there.
He'll be back, right?
I don't know.
Wow! What do you know?
So anyways, Luke goes to Dagobah, where Yoda tells him that in order to complete his training, he must confront his father, then the green alien dies. He speaks with Obi-Wan about Vader. Afterwards, Mon Mothma, leader of the Rebel Alliance, gavels the Rebel strike force. The Emperor has built a second Death Star. While there are many questions on how a second Death Star was built, it's not unfeasible to think that such a large empire that already had blueprints was building a second one behind the scenes. Hell, there might have even been a second one built during the prequels that we simply didn't see. People might say that the plan at the start of the movie was stupid, but Luke was prepared if anything went to shit. My main issue in the movie is the Ewoks. They were a questionable addition to the film. Now, Ewoks could have worked in this movie, but the execution was kind of underwhelming. The Ewoks could have been more of a distraction at the Battle of Endor than an actual threat. Because when you see that they decimate a Stormtrooper Legion, and not just any Legion, but the 501st, you know, these guys, it's actually pretty stupid. It's a contrivance. Meanwhile, Luke decides to turn himself into the Empire, and he goes to the Emperor's throne room. The Emperor's introduction is even better than Jabba's, the dark, cold atmosphere, and the Emperor's design is absolutely scary. This guy means shit. And while it is kind of stupid that the Emperor dies so easily, it could easily be explained off with how Vader was obviously more powerful than the Emperor, and was overpowered easily because of that. As for the space battle, Lando and the rebels realize that the Emperor lured them into a trap, but despite that, they overcome the odds, and manage to blow up the second Death Star. It's absolutely triumphant. The final scene shows how far the rebels have gone, from stealing shit to overthrowing an empire. Return of the Jedi wraps everything up really well. All the threads are tied, and the series is concluded in a satisfying way. George always intended this to be the happy ending, so while a sequel is not impossible, it would have to be approached carefully. Return of the Jedi is an excellent final chapter, and the saga should have honestly stopped there. The story was over, and George Lucas had no interest in making a sequel. Most franchises are always set up for more sequels, so for Return of the Jedi to defy that is a decision that shows that this story shouldn't go on forever. And while there may have been sequels, in the George Lucas canon, Star Wars ended with the Return of the Jedi. Anything after was better reserved for books and shit. I'm gonna give 8 points to the story. I think this movie has the best shots of the whole trilogy. The cinematography is great. It's something you could put in a picture frame or a thumbnail for a YouTube video. The art based off this movie is enough to prove that the film is beautifully made. While the duel between Luke and Vader is a bit primitive, hot damn did they do an excellent job making it look dynamic and engaging on screen. And for the third time, visual storytelling. You can tell how people feel simply by looking at their expressions. You could watch this movie on mute and still have an idea of what's going on. We are told little about the Emperor, for example, but we are shown so much shit. We know without watching the prequels that this guy destroyed the Jedi and ruled the galaxy for too long. It's time to put an end to him. The pace of the film is great. It's slow at the start, and then it gets fast and faster and faster and slowly building up to the climax. This was pretty much the end game before the Rise of Skywalker spoiled it. But if you ignore that the sequel trilogy ever happened, Return of the Jedi is paced perfectly. It makes us anticipate the final battle. You know it's coming, and when it finally happens, the movie certainly delivers. I'd assume Return of the Jedi 2 had a rough cut, but I'm too lazy to search for it. Return of the Jedi has earned a total of 9 points for the cinematography/editing. For the effects, this film once again looks fucking amazing, using the same techniques and amping it up to 11. At this point, the Battle of Endor was the biggest battle in the series. This is a full-on battle, and the effects more than make the worlds feel alive. The Sarlacc was a real thing they made. The visual effects are great too. I like the Emperor's Force Lightning ability. As for the visual design, I love it. Jabba's palace aliens are really good. Some of them are actually iconic in the eyes of fans. Quarrens and Weequay were used in some Star Wars video games. They are new, yet they feel like they belong in the original film. It feels like the original in terms of visual design. I like the visual design more than Empire Strikes Back, and that's because it looks more like the original while still being its own thing. My favorite design in the movie is the Emperor's Guard. The mysterious looking guards have a story of their own, and you just want to know more about them. This certainly makes you want to buy the Crimson Empire comics. This film is probably the most sellable of the original trilogy. If you want to buy Imperial Guard toys, Scout Trooper toys, Luke Skywalker toys, and so much more, I wouldn't be surprised if this film made the most money in terms of merchandise in the trilogy. Everything looks cool. Out of the original trilogy, I'd like to cosplay as the Royal Guard the most. Even the stuff I didn't like as much, such as the Ewoks, still look good. They belong in Star Wars, even if they were poorly implemented in the movie itself. The new costumes for our main characters are the best they've ever been. Luke, Leia, Lando, Vader, and Han, all of them have great costume designs, and they were bound to sell toys. As for the sets, once again, they're great. The forest moon of Endor has to be my favorite. They filmed it in an actual forest, the redwood forest in California, and that adds to the authenticity. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is what makes Return of the Jedi such a visually appealing movie. Everything looks great, unique, and creative. It's like they had a lot of fun making the sets. A lot of the notable sets look fantastic, and it's clear a lot of thought was put into them. I'm guessing that the concept artist was trying to send the trilogy off in a high note. I'm going to give 10 points to the visual design. Mark Hamill returns as Luke Skywalker. Once again, Hamill's performance reflects the maturity progression of the character. It's Luke's time to finish the fight. and Hamill does a good job reflecting that. I am convinced that this is a more mature Luke. An actor should adapt to different characters and differing personalities, and I think Hamill gets the job done. Harrison Ford returns as Han Solo. Han Solo probably has the weakest arc of the trio, so Harrison Ford didn't have to change much about his performance. There's no improvement, like Empire Strikes Back. I'd say Han Solo was entertaining enough to be a likable character. Harrison Ford was pretty much done with Star Wars at this point. Carrie Fisher returns as Leia Organa. She doesn't have much of a screen presence as the last film, so that's a shame, but despite that, Fisher does her best to make us notice Leia. I think it's a case of how much her character was written more so than the acting itself, but Leia's far from boring. It's just that she doesn't do much. David Prowse and James Earl Jones come back to finish the trilogy. Once again, the two do a great job coordinating the character. It's quite emotional in the scenes after he throws the Emperor off. In his final scene, he's played by actor Sebastian Shaw. Why it couldn't be David Prowse, whose voice was cut out for the entire trilogy, I have no idea. Especially since Prowse was met with such bad luck after Star Wars aside from this.
Looks like you two need a lesson in crossing the road. My little friend is going to show you how. First, find a safe place to cross.
Here?
A safe place away from parked cars, where you can see the road is clear and drivers can see you. Stop near the curb, but not too close. Look all around and listen for traffic. If traffic is coming, let it pass. When there is no traffic near, walk straight across, looking and listening all the time. We won't be there when you cross the road, so always use the green cross hand.
Ian McDiarmid plays Emperor Palpatine. Ian McDiarmid plays the most evil piece of shit you've ever seen. He has a threatening appearance, and his performance tells you, yeah, this guy has to be put down. Plus, it's finally good to meet the Emperor after his brief cameo in Empire Strikes Back. He has such an impressionable voice. Billy D. Williams is Lando Calrissian. I did notice that he doesn't have as much of a screen presence as Empire, despite being around for the entire movie instead of just the third act. Our boy Bill has a more serious role, and plays it convincingly. I do believe this is the same Lando trying to liberate his boy Han, destroy the second Death Star with his partner Nyan Nut.
Yeah.
I'm going to give 7 points to the acting. I think this has the best soundtrack of the trilogy. Since this was pretty much the finale, John Williams composes beautiful songs that fit the scenes perfectly. Whether it's tense action scenes or scenes of triumph, John Williams made sure to send the series off on a high note. Because keep in mind, we didn't know whether we would get more Star Wars movies. So to be safe, John Williams brought on his A-game, and boy did that pay off. I feel this is the soundtrack that could stand up to Revenge of the Sith, but that's a story for later. My favourite score in the movie is the Emperor's Throne Room. This is the most important scenes for the three characters featured in it. This is where Luke triumphs and where Vader and the Emperor perish. The Emperor might go down underwhelmingly, but the music more than makes up for it. As for the duel, it's powerful and it makes you overlook the at times clunky choreography. It's forgivable since it was the early 80s, but the music makes the scene so great. It pulls you into the scene. As for the sound, it's once again fantastic. Aside from maybe the burp from the Sarlacc, the sound effects are a fine addition to the collection of sound effects. Jabba's voice is so slimy and disgusting that it makes you loathe the character more. Force lightning is fierce and threatening. It sounds like it would hurt Luke like crazy. This is on point with the acting, but the sound effect on its own is great. I also like the background effects on Endor, which really gives the feeling of an alien forest. I'm going to give 10 points to the music / sound. Return of the Jedi completed a trilogy made by George Lucas and his team, ending the series off on a high note, with desire for more. The following years were great for Star Wars. The 90s had stories serving as a sequel to this movie, and how George Lucas would approach the next Star Wars movie was actually quite clever, but again that's a story for next time. Return of the Jedi capped off the trilogy effectively, and managed to be on par with the other two. It doesn't feel like a step down, it feels like consistent quality throughout, and that must not have been something easy to do. I kinda think that this is slightly inferior to Empire Strikes Back. The Ewoks didn't help at all. Return of the Jedi has earned a total of 44 points out of 50, equaling an 8.8 out of 10 score. I was surprised to learn that I liked this movie slightly more than Empire Strikes Back. Return of the Jedi was considered the worst of the original trilogy, but looking into it, I realized that the most popular of the three is my least favorite in the trilogy. That's the thing, Empire Strikes Back had some stiff competition, and your opinion can change when you go into deep analysis. Thanks for watching.
Water was running, children were running, you were running out of time. Under the mountain, a golden fountain, were you praying at the Larish shrine?